Welcome everyone. Yes, so seen from the program, my name's Alison Hicks and I'm volunteer librarian at the Pioneer Association. We do have members here of the association, so if anybody is interested in finding more about that, I'll save that to the end when we can have any questions, information on that. So today with my talk, we're going to be looking at the life of an ordinary pioneer woman and her family. Now, she arrived before 1846, and that's why I'm a member of the association. It's related to people who were here before the end of December 1846. In doing the talk, I'm also going to be highlighting a number of different sorts of records which can help you if you're doing any historical research. I grew up in Melbourne, and when we went to the greengrocers, there's always the adverse, Adelaide tomatoes, Adelaide celery, always considered to be the best that there was. So it means I'm sure I did eat some paradise celery in my childhood. But I came to Adelaide in the 1970s to do my dip ed. And my first appointment, teaching history, up the road at Campbelltown High School. And anybody Campbelltown High kids here? So, yes. And the areas we see to the right there, and I can remember it being like that, just so many market gardens, but that beginning of the housing development taking place within them. But I must admit, I never would have thought when I was there in my classroom back at Campbelltown High that 50 odd years later I'll be back talking about history in Campbelltown. So there we go. So if we're setting our scene, it's lovely that there are a couple of photos from the 30s, and so we have up there looking towards the east, then and now, and then looking down Silks Road. And interestingly, in some ways, not that much change, isn't there? And what's lovely is the house on the corner that we can see was owned by the Silkes. It's estimated as being built around 1900. So it was the family home until sold. Are there any Silk descendants here at all? Because I know a lot did stay in the area for a long time as market gardeners. Right, so I haven't got problems of being some distant relatives out there because Martha was in fact my 3 times great aunt. So we have a look at where she's come from. So here we have her baptismal papers. So you can see I've used Ancestry for those. So born in London, St George, Hanover Square, London. I've got the next page. The 30th of May, 1826. Her parents, John and Mary Ann Painter. And we can see on there, which is very handy for this one, that he was a servant. So it's always lovely to be able to find out occupations of members in the family. And the area there...
Who's the painter then?
So that's her father. So this is her maiden name, yes. So this is here when she's born. And so... her area there, you can see right in London there where he's working as a servant. If you look at the parents, so John and Mary, and they were married, St George, Hanover Square, in 1814. And the point where it becomes very relevant is the name here. So that's Mary Ann Grinstead. And so even though she's not baptised with that name, she does adopt it and use it. So Mary Jane Grinstead Painter, or then later on when she marries Silke. So she's adopted that name from her mother. Though interesting here, S-T-E-D, S-T-E-A-D. Always many variations in spelling. So this is her family. So you've got a number of children born there. So my great-great-grandmother is firstborn Elizabeth. And we can see that, again, his job, so servant. This looks like Captain Dan, which sounds rather interesting, doesn't it? Yes. Porter. So he's doing various jobs in service. The bottom record here is when Elizabeth marries Ambrose Edward Varden Cordwainer, who was a shoemaker, and there, down there, John is a butler. So again, in service. So they are my great-great-grandparents, and so my connection to Martha. Now, it seems the family were always interested in coming out to South Australia. In 1839, the whole family, including Elizabeth's new husband, they were living at Arundel, which is east of Chichester and Portsmouth. Now, the older siblings were the first to leave, and they came out on the ship the Moffat, arriving in 1839 in December. And you imagine the shock that must have been, arriving in December in South Australia. But it also was a very difficult voyage. I was fortunate to find in a book, which is No Place for a Nervous Lady, yes, and there is a letter from a woman, Ellen Moger, and she lost 3 of her 4 young children on that voyage. And in fact, and she says there was no cow on board for milk. And when the doctor did finally try and do something for them, port wine. That's going to be so useful for children, isn't it? And we do know from records that Martha's sister, Mary Ann, died on that voyage as well. Now, as I said, the others, there's their one, so shoemaker, and we can see that there's Mary Ann, servant. So they're putting service down as their occupations of so she's 17. There's brother William, who's a baker. And what we often see, his husband, this is a 23, that's a female, therefore the wife, and a baby. So the women aren't often listed separately if they're married. So if we have a look at Martha and her parents, we can see that, yes, they had applied for assisted passage as well. Like John, there is brewer, baker, gardener, farmer. In other words, what occupations might be wanted in the colony? And so he puts down them all. Now, there was a son, John, and he did apply as a labourer, but he didn't go on the voyage. And I haven't tracked him down with such a common name. But we can see down the one below, there is Martha, housemaid, and saying age 15. So at that age, listed separately so that she'd be travelling with the single women. So on the ship, you had single men, the married with their young children, and the single women. So she's there, but if we check the dates, she was actually 13 at the time. She was a couple of months off her 14th birthday when she sailed. So she was very young to think she's on that voyage and not sleeping in the same area with her parents. Again, a terrible voyage. So you see, luckily, somebody did keep a diary which has been transcribed, and you can find that online. So they often talk about the weather, but if we look at that one on the 21st, an infant of 12 hours died, threw it overboard. Just the way that's written, not as if there's a funeral or anything, thrown overboard. The next day, there's a strong breeze, but 2 children died. And the 26th, steady breeze, a child died, this being the 24th death. George Hopgood of our division, very ill. So you can imagine there she is, she's 14, she's seeing this death around her, people ill, how much that must have hurt her. And she's with people who are grieving as well. And that's the thing, the ships of this time, you think, oh, free immigration better than the convicts. My husband's great-great-grandmother came out on the last female convict ship to New South Wales, 1 death. So in later times, the comparisons, amazing. The next record we've got, which we have got there in state records, but they have been digitised and are available in Family Search. And so we can see the painters are living in Gilbert Street. So we've got the parents. Susanna's younger, so she'd be the under 14. There are 2 females under 21, so one you'd think would be Martha, don't know who else, there is no young child mentioned. Now, little baby brother Robert was 1.5 when they left England. So was he one of those deaths on the ship. So even on the voyage, she may have seen her little brother go overboard. Letters. Now, a treasure that we do have in the Pioneer Association is a collection of letters and some Bibles that belonged to a family who came out in 1839. And so this is a sample of a letter from 1840. So you see we squash it on paper, fold it, put it down with some sealing wax so it can be sent off. The big surprise for me when I was transcribing this, we can see it up closer there, and it's got poor painter's daughter was the same aboard ship, but she died opposite the Cape of Good Hope through neglect of the doctor. So again, I looked it up. This is the only painter family in the colony at that time. I know that Mary Ann had died, so this gives a location which I hadn't known. And again, supporting what Ellen wrote in her letter about that doctor. But the letter continues. There was very queer going on in that family. What I have heard, they are a curious lot. One of them is married, I believe, to his master's wife's sister. And so you're getting this attitude, oh my goodness, how could he marry that? And a few years later, I actually found reference to that in a newspaper article. So it's 1937, and Mrs. Pratt is a daughter of William, so Martha's brother. And Mr. Painter, then a young man, was employed in the bakery business of a Stephen Goldsack. The article says an uncle of the bride-to-be, but we know it was brother-in-law. The young man and the girl expressed a wish to marry, but Mr. Goldsack was opposed to the marriage, so a clandestine wedding was agreed upon. The youth attended the church in his baker's apron and cap, leaving his delivery basket outside, And I think, lovely. When I looked at when they arrived, and they had only known each other for a few months, so he might have had a concern, but oh dear, how could we do this? So just lovely reflections in letters, isn't he, of the ordinary opinions and ways that happened back then, not just the famous. 2 years later, another letter. And this one you can see, we're trying to write as much as we can to send across. So we write across the page and, oh dear, we've run out of paper, so we turn it sideways. I know. Yes, imagine receiving it. I'll tell you what, transcribing isn't much fun either. But we can just see, if I've got my little light, across here, Mr. and Mrs. Painter is both gone to Sydney, but taken, etc. So I'll read my typed out piece. But taken only their youngest daughter. The other is left without a father or mother to look to her. She has grown up pretty, with half of the fellows in the place after her. I will fear it'll turn out bad with her, for she has a pretty character already, whether she deserves it or not. I'm inclined to believe it to be true. She is also very vain of herself. It is the most curious family I ever met, with the old people worse than children. So I'm thinking, do we all watch Who Do You Think You Are? And you've got, oh, I'm a musician because, or I'm determined because. Well, I've got a very good excuse if I want to be curious. Yes, I can have an excuse for my behaviour. But there can be another outlook to it. There is a book, it's available online and very, relevant for this area. The Reminiscences of 47 Years of Clerical Life in South Australia by Reverend E.K. Miller. But he includes a chapter in it, Matrimonial Incidences. And in here he writes, in the earlier years there were fewer females than males, as was to be expected in a new settlement. And in the bush, a woman was for some time a rarity. Consequently, when an emigrant ship came in known to have a proportion of single women on board, the bachelors were usually advised, be on the lookout, often getting recommendations to rush to the ship and secure first choice. By the way of jest, a party would sometimes scan a vessel with glasses as she was working up to the anchorage, one exclaiming, "I bespeak the blue dress." Another, "I go for the pink bonnet." Another, "I'm for the plaid shawl," and so on. So he's got this, and he then goes on to describe somebody. I mean, I think the woman had only just gone off the ship and you go, "Will you marry us?" So his book, great to read for those things. When you read it, you think, oh, a minister might be very religious, but you've got these things in it, and he does refer to the first church at St Martin's and so forth. So, as I say, available digitally online. One thing interesting in that letter also is up here with our PS. And it says, "I shall be anxiously looking this time 12 months for answer." So in other words, written this letter and knows that it could be 12 months before I get a reply. By the time I get my letter to a ship sails, it then eventually gets to, say, England, then at the port it's got to get to where the person lives and vice versa back. So in our day and age of instant communication, you think of the people here knowing something could have happened and you won't know for all that time. And so you think when the Painter family arrived, Martha arrives and she finds out, oh, her sister has died on that previous voyage, and they arrived not knowing that. But we do find that she gets married. So it's only 9 months after that letter, Martha married Henry Silke. This is interesting. So this record is the St John's Church marriage register. And in Family Search, a lot of church documents have now been digitised and are available online for you. So you can see the date given there is the 20th of March. And that's 2 months short of her 16th birthday. So she is very young, and that's why it's got underage. Yes, he's about 20 years older. So signed there. Then see, they both signed it. And even in this one, we've got MJG Painter. So she's using the Grinstead already herself at that young time. So the date there we can see, we've got the 20th. Now we're very lucky in South Australia that we do have access to earlier BDMs through the Genealogy Society. And so looking at the database, so if we look it up, so I've looked up for her wedding, and not a member, we've got the outline information. But then as a member, can view the details. And this one gave the marriage date as the 21st. So, right. Now, the originals have been filmed and are on microfiche, so I looked that up, and that one said the 12th of March. So when I looked, so I had a look at the microfiche of the weddings before and after, and the ones that I got online from St John's, and, all right, this here is a mistranscription, so they've done 21st instead of the 12th. But still, if you go to the church record, it says the 20th. And I found that, yes, so you've got the church record, and then when the minister filled in for the civil records, the government records, he wrote down the wrong date by 1 day. All the others either side of Martha's one, they were the correct date, but this one was wrong. So it's interesting that way back then, people did make mistakes. They made errors, but always wise.
Cross-check your own references too.
Oh, that's the thing. So just cross-checking, it just shows sometimes you think, oh no, it's there, that must be okay. Always double-checking, finding other sources if possible. No, I've got once, or can I get two sources of information to confirm the information that I'm finding? So we need to find out about Henry, who she marries. And so here's where our Silke name comes in. So again on Ancestry, we can see his baptism. So born on 14th of June 1806. Remember, she was born in 1826. So we have got that age difference. Kidderminster is west of Birmingham. And he's given a Presbyterian baptism, which is interesting. Now, no Oake in that name. But when I had a look at his...
Silke is different too.
Exactly, the Silke. And yes, so we'll get on to spelling, because when we can see his parents marrying, if we look at the witnesses, Catherine Oakes and John Oakes. So I'm wondering if they were close to the family and he adopted it himself because of that, because it's certainly not in his baptism. And yes, spelling, and this will come the whole way through it. Names are spelt differently. The E, the not, the E, can be a Y. How people spell their given names, there can be alterations, which name you use. And this comes up frequently. So here's Henry's family. So he's the eldest with his brothers and sisters. Now I put in there Anne because she does become relevant to our story. So baptised as Anne. And another one down there got Myra with a Y-R-A. And they're in the same area. Now when we look what was he doing when he's originally in England, and found out through here, so we're saying, all right, bankruptcies. So here in 1828, here's Henry with his father, carpet manufacturer. And then in 38, carpet manufacturer. So he is working with his father, but they're facing bankruptcy. So is this a reason why he decided to move? Now the sister Myra, who when we look at her marriage is now M-I-R-A, and she marries John William Pope. And it's interesting that Joseph, her father and sister are the witnesses there. But looking up him, once again, carpet warehouseman. So she's probably met him through the business of her father and brother. So there she is married there, but the next information we get is the ship Winchester. So we've got Henry there, horticulturalist. He's probably thinking they don't need me to make carpets over in South Australia. So if you're looking at occupations of people coming out, always do double check there, because that, and as we saw with Martha, ages and so forth, they can often be tweaked so that we will be more acceptable as an assisted passenger to the colony. Also down below there, Mrs. Myra Silke, but she uses the name William as her surname and saying she's a widow. Now she married John William Pope, and now she is William, which does seem to suggest maybe something else was going on. He'd gone bankrupt. I haven't found a death, but it's a pretty common sort of name. But the fact that she has used not her official married surname is an interesting thing to explore, shall we say. But once she's here, she's all right, because she does remarry. So George Hutton Barnard, Colonial Secretary's Office. So that's very good. And we find the family there are in North Adelaide. That's where they go to live. And when I look at the marriage certificate of Martha, she was living in North Adelaide. Now we know the parents had gone to Sydney for a while. A theory may be, did she get work for the Barnards, and that's how she met him, in North Adelaide. Got no proof, but there are always those things you wish somebody would write and tell you, don't you, if you're researching history? Why not tell us more? Now, other documents, there are a lot of things around that can help you. So this helps us with the land, being out here in paradise. So I just did a general search for Henry Oake, and see, this is just the local wiki up there. So we've got the land, first of all, with the South Australia Company. There's its section, known as Burford Estate, but it goes to Annette Carolyn Silke, Ellen Thorpe in Van Diemen's Land. So this is the eldest sister, Anne. So once again, that changes of names. So instead of Anne, she's now Annette. And I did check on her, she's a very, very interesting woman. And she did go to Van Diemen's Land as a governess and then became a teacher. So she was the one who had the money to do that, but then Henry's the one who is then leasing and working the land. And we can follow that through there. See there, now she's, yes, Annette Carolyn Silke spinster, so she's mentioned. Other records, and here we have in the history section, is you've got the land, that section, rates assessment, tenant, and then look, just the 2-bedroom house, later on a 6-bedroom house. So there are all these other records that you can be going to find information that help you understand their lifestyle. So that section, if we look on an early map, so we're going, here's the city, and then way up in the corner, there's our 349. And what I like about the very early maps is it does show you that it wasn't, good old Fifth Creek then, Ormsby Rivulet, that all the creeks did actually have a name back then. So that gives you a location. Hundreds maps, again, very useful for finding locations, and I do use them all the time. As you can see, I've done 1873 down to later years. But again, we can see there, and you see by this time, up in 1873, the name change. And also we've got Thorndon Park, so you're starting to see the development of the suburb. But hundreds maps are great for locating where anybody's lived, and you can get those quite readily online. They're through the State Library. Children. So yes, they did have big families, didn't they? So there we have the ones. And so Catherine Lloyd, Henry had a sister Catherine who married a Mr. Lloyd. So it's married off them. And that's coming through, a strong family connection all the time. So we've got Maria Isabella, etc. And most of them are being born Burford, so being born out there on the farm, section 349. We've got near Shipley, that was just somebody else's property right next door. What's interesting there though, if we looked at that one with the house record, the rent, in 1855-56, it says it was 2 rooms, Pise house, which means you've got your slabs of timber with mud or earth or clay in between. She's having those children out there in that little home. That's a lot, isn't it? To think of being a mother out there who's helping. Especially you can see mother does die in 1845. It says enlargement of the heart. So she hasn't got mum to help. They're on acreage distance. How alone, even once they're born, being alone, looking after those children in that tiny cottage and whole lifestyle that's going with it. Baptisms, do have those again. They're on Family Search, you can get those on there. And see, the first 3 are all actually born different dates but baptised together at Holy Trinity. And get out of Burford, probably by the time you think of packing them all up and getting them in there to a baptism, oh, what an effort. You don't want to do that. And then another baptism. Later on, St George's Church is built, and so there's a photo, it's 1872, but it was built earlier, and therefore the children could be baptised there, not as far to go. Now, a couple more aren't mentioned there because we do have St Martin's Church in Campbelltown being built. So they may have been baptised there, but the surviving baptismal records date from 1862. So I haven't got those to refer to, but it's a possibility. So I've done that, travelled that. I mean, now we think, here we are up in paradise and we're getting to St George's Church. That seems bad enough, doesn't it? So I'm thinking, getting in that idea of what life was like. And a favourite book I've got, of course it's got great cartoons in it. Yes, The Life and Adventures of Edward Snell. He was an artist. He did brilliant paintings of insects and all sorts, where as he's keeping his diary, he's doing these little sketches. And some of them almost like little comics almost. So, just the river at the early days, because, people are clearing the land, aren't they? So knocking things down, think summer it's dry, what's coming in winter. They might have their land there, but you've got to go down and get the water, don't you? You're doing your washing, all the things she's doing. And we mentioned travelling. So horse and cart, that's all right. Yeah, but no made roads. Is there even a track from where you're going? Or are you riding across people's paddocks to get there? And just think of that distance, of how long it's taking, and if you've got the kids on board. I love that he did go to a baptism, because it does give a wonderful sketch. I like how the baby's got the big squeal, I'm sure. But also, what I like is he's got a sketch of what they're wearing. So we're getting a good idea of ordinary clothing, not somebody, well, a bit too early for photos now, but later on when you get the portrait pokes and they're all done up. Here he sketched what he saw the people wearing at the time. There we go. Now, this is the other side where, we complain, don't we? Somebody might have whinged about rain today, though I think most of us were very happy. But yes, look at the dust storm, look at that. So just imagine, we've not got our sprinklers on to keep the dust down and, irrigation systems, whatever. If the paddocks are dry and it's windy, you get the dust. Adelaide after 2 days of rain. And that brown street is the southern end of Morfett Street. So you're looking towards the hills down Gilbert Street. You think, oh yeah, but it rains in winter. No, that's January. So there they are, hiking through the mud. I like his pipe. Hiking through the mud in January. So just to think, just the simple weather, and you're in that little 2-room hut with all your kids trying to cope with that. I had to put this one in. The bottom one on the left, that's just funny, because what do we all have? Flies. Flies, flies, flies. He was going nuts with the flies. So what he describes this sketch as is they put sugar on the bench to attract the flies, and then they said, just to kill them. So I don't know if he really did it, but it's just funny. It just shows you how flies would drive you nuts. And also, at one time, he's living at Kensington, and the next door neighbour had a baby, and he said, the baby screamed all day. And I think, how lovely sketch. And think, Martha would have listened to that all day. You think, every baby, think, now that's just normal stuff. You imagine illnesses. I've fallen over, I cut my knee, you haven't got the W, you haven't got the Bongello, you haven't, all the things you're going through with kids, and she's out there on the 340, on those acreages. What a tough life as a mother. And then, of course, what we know happened to all. So there we are, 4 years croup and teething. And in fact, teething is listed quite commonly as a cause of death back then. Now, first we think erupting through, one, infection getting in to the splitting there. We don't know about germs, antibiotics, etc. don't exist. Also, what might you have been putting on there or whatever to soothe the child? And so you will find teething coming up quite a bit as the cause of death that they put it down to. But 7 months. So just that thing that you're going through, of you're losing them, and you've still got your other children with you. Now, one interesting one they did with one of the daughters, and when I was looking, that it came up she was buried in St Kilda in Melbourne. I'm going, hold on, could she? You know, that's a long way to go from there over there. But I went to records, and so Victorian BDMs, you can get the actual certificate, but I like this record where it shows you other things on the page as well, because they can sometimes be highly relevant to getting a broader picture of the times. So to increase that, I know it's hard to read, there you are, Fanny Matilda Silke. Once again, yes, variations in spelling. And the cause of death, and I'll try and pronounce it, tabes mesenterica, resulting in rupture of some vessel. And looking that up, it said it's an obsolete term for tuberculosis of the mesenteric lymph nodes, historically causing severe abdominal pain, fever, weight loss, and malnutrition. It primarily stemmed from bovine tuberculosis, often infecting children through contaminated milk. And so you just think of just a simple thing like that, where you think, you know, we've milked the cow, here's this lovely fresh milk for the baby. No. But she's gone across to Melbourne when her baby's only 3 months old. So I don't know, is she going to show off the baby? Does the baby sick and is there a better doctor or, you know, better treatment in Melbourne, or she needs support? Because the person reporting it, Annie Carolyn, but now Longley. So sister-in-law, Henry's sister, has now married and is living in Paran. So she's reported it. So again, strong family connection. But again, interestingly, so there's Henry Oake Silke with no E, and Jane Silke. So most of you know, Martha Jane, was she commonly called Jane, not Martha? Don't know, though. I just this week looking up a directory, thought, I'll just check on the Paradise one, and had a Mrs. J.M. Silke, so maybe she did. But I've tried to use the same name consistently because they did use different names often in the family. So there you are, she's got the one, and that child is, I checked with the cemetery, she is buried in St Kilda Cemetery. So again, you know, not being able to visit your baby's grave. Now, marrying an older man, you'd think, you know, 20 years senior, it would be expected, yes, he could die before her, but it might have been a bit earlier than thought. Now, Henry was suffering from gout and went to stay with eldest daughter, Catherine, in Kingston, South East, because she'd married a man who was manager of the hotel there. He'd hoped that, you know, fresh the air, this could improve my health, but it didn't. And we can see there he is, gout of the stomach, and he's died. Of course, what we don't know is, was she with him or not? Was she home with, you know, looking after the rest of the family? So he may have died without her being there. Don't know. But now she's lost children and she's lost her husband as well. And then, of course, another child dies before her. So at this stage, she's alive. She's lost 5 of her 8. This stage it's 4. There's another one coming. 5 of her 8 children and her husband before she died. So and again, a serious attack of the measles, and we all sort of think, oh, just measles, isn't it? Disregarding it, but of course, massive effects that can come from it. So this is the other one. Yes, taken the Myra from the other one, but often spelt differently. And again, with the Victorian BDMs, you can get the whole lot, which you pay, but it gets emailed instantly. But you also can get just a little summary. So this one you could get quite freely, and you can see she's married Thomas Fallon in 1870. But do find an obituary with it because they both moved to Strathalbyn. The Terminus Hotel and the Robin Hood Hotel. Still there, I drove past last weekend. And so sorely missed. So, you know, it gets a lovely description about her genial nature and happy disposition. And she's buried there. Of course, from here down to there, how much they saw of each other back in horse and cart days, who knows? But again, you're double checking because here, married in 1862, but the official document shows 1870. So always that double checking of your source materials, because when people, if the child wrote that, now I think mum and dad got married in, and the same, how old is a person when they die? Because, they're not carrying around their birth certificates then. They'll say, now, I reckon mum was 69. So you have to check that accuracy. So here we have all these of her children dying before her. So, yeah, having to be strong. So we get back to, this is an interesting one. Catherine Lloyd, the first daughter, and as I said, got married to a person, the licensed victualler, down in Kingston, SE. Robert Ewens. Now, if we go back to those letters that William Ewens wrote about dear Martha, about what a vain one she is, that's his son. So obviously the family thought better of each other later on. She marries his son and goes to live there. He is a widower. And what we get is, yes, she has 2 children with him, but then deaths. Her husband dies, and look, just a few months later, their child dies. So 2 deaths so close together, and they are buried together down in Kingston, SE. But what is very different about this one is that we see that later on there's another birth. Because what she does is that she takes up with a man, he's Frederick Ludwig Kruger, and he worked on the railway that was being built between Narracourt and Kingston. And she has a son with him. Okay, and then you think, well, nothing much said. But the next bit happens, it is something that I don't care what date, even today, if this made national headlines, you would be, because this one, yes, the Windsor murder, old southeastern mystery, Kruger now in South Africa. A man had murdered a woman, and when he escaped to Western Australia, and when they're looking into it, he'd already murdered others. That's where, suspected of 3 murders, committed all sorts of crimes. Somebody even tried to link him with Jack the Ripper. But you had some people all these years later saying, I reckon that looks like, and therefore it makes the headlines. And there we have some of Mr. Burkett, because he knew. I'm inclined to think that it was Kruger. He'd arrived at Kingston in 1873. Then shortly afterwards, he paid his addresses to Catherine Lloyd Ewens, a widow, who kept an hotel and had 1 child. They lived together as man and wife and had 1 child. When Kruger had been there about a year, everything was sold and they cleared out together. And you think, imagine at that time that there's your daughter in national press of, living in sin, basically, isn't it? How many years later you think of me, younger times, still then, yes, frowned upon. So to have your family in headlines like that. And of course they were interviewed. And there's a picture, so he must look a bit like that. And the second daughter, when he looked at it, describes him saying he had a half sleepy but stealthy look, which seemed to frighten one, but when he was angry, his eyes almost blazed and he behaved like a madman. And here's where we get to Martha. The mother stated that when she knew him, he was married to a woman who came from Queensland and that he had 1 or 2 children. This woman she traced to Victoria and there lost sight of her. Her daughter, however, would not be reasoned with, and hence the action that he took. So just think, she's got to know him, and she's gone to investigate, probably gone on to sister-in-law in Melbourne and everything, getting together to saying, it's no good about this man, don't go with him, but daughter is not listening. And I did have a look on Ancestry and found somebody who'd done a tree on this and who has put on there that there was a woman who through DNA was a biological daughter of him. She didn't follow it up and think, but so it sounds like there could be possibilities in that he was. But no, she left anyway. and lots of other things there. And it's just that, and the one up there, I'll have to do it very quickly, but, you know, the marriage was entirely against the mother's wishes, but when she heard they were going, she rushed down to get to the ship. She hastened down to the port. But no, the ship had gone. And when it came back, down she went to Port Adelaide to find what's gone on. So, you know, she's really trying to keep in contact, isn't she? Even though she says, no, this is not a reputable relationship to be in. Like it, Kruger, she's safe in Cape Town, but Kruger's gone to the dog fields. So he's left her alone already. And so lots of inquiries. In the other one, description, but it says, in an album at the house is a photo of Kruger. And that's where they're saying, no, it can't be him. So they must have been connected again if they've got a photo then. But another one was interesting. Mrs. Ewan's mother called to make inquiries as to whereabouts of her daughters. A large sum of money had been left to her by a relative in England, which I couldn't find anything about that, but, you know, might have enticed. If tracing her down, again, Family Search has done a lot of the South African records. And so here there's 1 page and then 2. So she has had a number of children with him, but these are all baptised at the same time. So she was with him, at least on and off, but when I looked for his death record, it showed he was absolutely distanced from his wife. There's his death certificate, committed suicide by a bullet wound in the brain. And the record also says he's distanced, supposed to be married in Australia, information vague. Supposed to be several children in Australia, but information indefinite. So he's definitely distanced from his own family, all those children. And the bottom one, there was a will which the deceased tore up and partially burnt on the day of his death. So he didn't even want them to inherit. So I think Mother had a wise mind about the state of that man. And there she is, her death certificate. She did die in 1927 and she is buried there in Durban. And it said about, you know, oh, she was looking for daughter, and I did find that ad in the paper. So Mrs. Kate Kruger, something to your advantage, but it says address Pulford Road, Prospect. I thought, no, she's always been out at Paradise, hasn't she? Ah, have to check that out. Land title, so you can find out. We can get this one for certain years freely available online. And we can see, yes, she did have land there. So there she is, Martha Jane Silke, Prospect. But she then transfers it to the daughter, who was baptised Maria Isabella, but it's now Isabella Maria. They did like changing their names in that family. But it's, you know, indicating that she did have, you know, property. And maybe that was a sort of thing, come back here and, you know, you can live here in a house, I'll give you things. And following through that, the block next door, she bought as well. And looking today at that street, the house on the left, the one the daughter had, and the one that Martha bought on the right has since been pulled down, but they did own property there. And her other daughter does die after her, though, in 1913. So the last of the family, Charles August, so he is the one who stays in Paradise, and all the silks are from him. So gardener, so market gardeners in the past, they were just gardeners. Number of children from his first marriage, I think that after a long and painful illness, which that sounds terrible. He marries again Ellen Jane Spiller. Now, if you go back to the person who wrote the letter about the Curious Painter family, well, she is a niece of his. So the families did get together, but they did have children, and they're the ones who stayed. And that's a lovely photo showing they're doing reasonably for themselves. Now, Annie, who we mentioned, who had married, she went ahead and did have her own huge property portfolio. She is a wonderful one, sidetrack to go on. But in her will, how she mentions Charles Silke. And there we've got the Barnard family. So that was Henry's sister, leaving money to them. And then we've got Fallon. That's the one who went to Strathalbyn is mentioned. You know, and then Laura Isabella, so even one of Charles's daughters. So the families are being mentioned in her will. And in fact, in the end, she did a new one saying that nephew Charles, to make sure everything's equally divided above them. She didn't have children, but she obviously felt very strongly about Henry's family and had very strong connections with them. And in Martha's will, which she has written on. So she wrote this in 1907. The interesting part, I'll start with lower down. I give to my daughter Isabella and son Charles Augustus all of my landed property as follows. She then goes on to delineate exactly which sections of the land there in Paradise went to which child. She was very specific about it. But she has got in there that he is, right, Joseph Varden of Unley Park, he's the executor of the will. And in the end, she also has left him £20 and a picture to him to keep in remembrance of me, a true and a friend he has been to me. And there's Kate who's mentioned as well. So he was my great-great-uncle, right? So great-grandmother's brother, who did go on to become, he was Mayor of Hindmarsh and then the local legislature and then a senator for South Australia, living in Unley Park. So I don't think the £20 would have done too much for him, but the picture might have. And what this is interesting to me, there's a picture of him, but also we can see that he was on the first board of directors for the new market company, the East End Markets. And it's maybe one, because I'd probably meant, yes, and Varden Avenue named after him, that's the family. And so now a connection starts to make, true friend, was it such a lovely, close relationship that here I have my cousin who is a market gardener with land there, and therefore he is interested in the industry and trying to promote, you know, things for market gardeners. So that really makes a sense of why he got involved in the East End markets when he lived in Hindmarsh and Unley Park. You know, nothing to do with it. So yes, Martha Jane Silke died, 88th year, and even though she'd lost, as I say, 5 of her 8 children before she died, she looked at the children, 24 grandchildren, 21 great-grandchildren. So she really did leave, you know, she did have a big family around her, both her own family and we can see through relatives connected with Annette. And she is buried in St Martin's Cemetery. Now and the cause of death I have got here, fatty degeneration of the heart and chronic bronchitis, which must have been hard in the weather. She's buried there, and I'm actually very grateful that somebody in Find a Grave went and took that photo, because unfortunately with South Australian legislation, sites get reused, don't they? Luckily a lot of my family went to Victoria. They are still there, no matter what. You've got that gravesite in perpetuity. So even though I had no idea where great-grandparents were, able to locate it through records and go and visit the site, which is still, you know, it's all still there. Somebody took a photo, but it has been reused. But when you think back, when William Ruins wrote his letter, he says, I fear it will turn out bad with her. But it didn't, did it? You know, we can see she was a strong woman. She survived just ordinary hard conditions, but what she was doing for her children, for Kate, and going across to Victoria, etc., always on the lookout for her family. So very important with that. And that's what I think we like to do, is to recognise her, because she will be an example of all those very ordinary people who came out and settled, not just the famous ones. So thank you, and any questions or comments and other people might like to feed in. Thank you.